I wanted to talk about just like a couple high level like budget things with everybody and kind of get everyone else's feedback on them. And then I think the next step after this would be for each board to have the subcommittee come together and like really decide on like what's going in the budget and what's not.
Yeah.
Just as like an FYI, and I can circulate this, I just have a couple questions for Mike. But Mike did send me, like, I said, can you just run the budget? Like,
Yeah.
everybody's asks, put it all in there. Any assumptions that you have on his side, and we're $1.2 million overspent on budget.
Okay.
So that's available after this meeting, we can get a
I
copy
have,
or?
I have a couple questions for him before, and like just to double check, and then maybe he might have to change a couple things. But that's kind of like where we're at, which is pretty steep. Like in my experience in the past, it's been like with everybody's asks in there, it'll be like 500,000, 400, 500,000 over budget because maybe he hasn't put in all his assumptions yet for income. But that's a pretty significant difference there.
Aaron, is that including the estimated health insurance?
That's one of my
increase?
questions for him.
Okay.
I believe it is
That
because
includes what?
The estimated increase to the health insurance, which they said was 1.5. So I'm wondering if it's 1.2 without it or 2.
Right.
I'm assuming that's in
7
there.
with it.
That's one of my questions
Yeah.
for him for sure.
Okay.
Because yeah, that would be even worse.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk about like maybe a couple of the asks from the different departments and kind of get some feedback. So
Can, before we jump into the departments, so I noticed on the FY25 numbers, it doesn't reflect what the fire department asked for, what they were asking for the overtime. Like on the document I have from the town's website, it's not showing, the overtime is showing as 400,000, not,
A million?
huh?
Not the
Not the
million?
million, right. So then I was wondering on that piece of it.
Are we being televised today?
But it is that,
yes.
We are. Okay.
So wait, so you're talking about for like this fiscal year that we're currently in?
so I'm talking about the budget requested at this year for this upcoming fiscal year, when Chief Lutz had he basically was requesting $1 million for overtime.
Yep.
When I look at the Finance Committee Budget Report of Recommendations, no, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. This is last year's.
Yeah.
That's last year, so I don't have, okay.
Yeah,
I got
so
you.
we did increase it to 400,000 last year.
Last year.
And then the $1 million is in the current year budget.
Okay.
That's
So I don't have.
by, and I asked Mike for this. I don't know if he sent it out to anybody else.
I did not get it.
Just
Yeah,
last
I
week.
don't.
But
Maybe it's-
I think that we don't need to like necessarily spend time. But can we start with fire?
Yeah.
So where in terms of the overtime, I think the $1 million is way too much. As of March, the end of March, so about 3/4 of the way through the year, the fire overtime spend is at 323. So he is using, I mean, he's definitely going to be, I think, over that 400,000. I'm not sure what number we increase it to, if we do or don't, but I think $1 million is way too much.
So you're saying last year he budgeted for 400. Right now, as of March, he's at 233.
323.
323.
Yeah.
Okay.
He did mention he might be a little stronger than it might be 8 or 8.5 or whatever, but still.
I still don't know how he could get to 8 from 323 in March. How he could get that high in
That's
3
just
months.
3 more months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget he's down 5 people.
Yeah, he just said a couple people quit too.
So if you're looking at the rotation,
Mhm.
I mean, it could escalate pretty quickly. I don't know. It seems an enormous amount.
Yeah.
But I would think that they're probably at they don't fill those 5 positions, you're probably at 5 or 6, I
Yeah,
would think.
yeah,
Because you
That's-
still got, if you said your figures were from March,
yeah.
so
And
you've got, yeah, so you've still got 3 months.
Do you have, what you have from Michael, is it basically kind of like in the format?
Yeah.
So all the requests for the upcoming?
Yeah.
Is there any way that we can,
Yeah, it was just, and the chair had asked for a rough number last week. That was all changed, so I have updated numbers with debt and health insurance and everything, so.
So was health insurance not in this?
It.
Or like, not the, like,
It
not the-
was, but it was just a rough number, so.
Okay, but it's the big number. It's at least a big number.
Yeah, that was a big number. So,
Okay.
so right now, with all of the numbers put in, kind of looking
Oh,
at.
sorry, Michael.
Revenues.
Michael,
it's a-
sorry. Can you sit at the desk so that the microphone can pick up your voice?
can
Anywhere?
can we get the copy of that? Because I think it's gonna be challenging to have this discussion if we don't have.
Well, I mean, we could still have a discussion on like overall, like I'm feeling like how do we feel about adding new positions, things like that, regardless of where the budget's falling.
Yeah, sorry. Sean and Ed couldn't be here, so if they watch it later, I just want them to be able to hear your explanation. So I was trying to get a microphone to pick up your voice.
There's one over here you can.
There's one right here next to,
So we'll hold off the printing of that then. Is that this meeting?
Electronically, I mean, because I think
Oh, I should.
Yes, no, I think certainly we can share the information. I just wanted to see what people were looking for at this point. And I think as the chair indicated, is it just talking about the budget requests or looking at the overall picture? So either way, I can do either way that you're looking for.
I mean, it's,
I guess
it's up to you all.
both to me. Like, I mean, I guess if we're gonna start, if it's now April, we'll need to know, yes, the asks, but also where do we stand from a budget, like a overall budget perspective? I mean, our first question was based on the information you gave Aaron last week, which we now know is outdated. 1.2 million seems to be over what we have, but so now we're a little unclear.
Right, the number that I'm looking at right now, based on just updating the debt, the health insurance that we just kind of finalized last week, in terms of internally as to what that number would be. And looking at revenues, and again, everything is fluid at this point, but it's at a deficit of $1,080,000 right now, so.
$1,080,000.
$1,080,000.
Yeah, just about $1 million.
$1,080,237, so. So certainly if that's what I brought to this meeting, if that's what people wanted right now, or.
I don't care. I just, in the intro, I don't want to waste time. Like, I don't have a ton of time, so I just don't want to waste time.
Yeah, we can.
We can
Put a
follow
pin
up
in
here
that.
in another meeting then, even though that takes more time, but
Share it electronically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for the fire overtime, maybe it's like 500 or 600, but I think going up to $1 million is way too much. And then I also.
talking about that, okay, I have a question on that. Why is the problem that we're having problems getting people? Are we the only town or city that's having problems? Because the overtime is caused by us not having people, correct? If we can't
Part
get
of
fired,
it's,
if we
part of
can't,
it's civil service, so it takes a long time to hire.
so what are
once
we gonna do
people
about this?
quit. But also too, according to the chief, from the many times he's been in front of our board, has said like that we've tried to be competitive with our pay, but also, so that's part of it. Location, if people are coming from far away and they find a job closer, they want to be closer so they don't have to commute. And also too, I think he said most recently, when people come in for their shift, they usually bring a bag because they know they have forced overtime. So people are leaving for departments that are better staffed, so they can be home for their families because there won't be forced overtime.
Do we
So there's probably like 3 or 4 factors there.
I understand, I remember all that, but do we expect this to go away? Are we the only city, are we the only city in town that's having this problem? Even the ALS, we can't get stacked the ALS because
I mean,
I mean-
these are the conversations we
Yeah.
had with Chief Lutz.
Yeah. I don't know
Well,
if they're, I
I'm
mean,
going
there's
through you first.
to
I'm
have,
going through your department first because we gotta control this thing some way.
but you just said you already knew, so you're asking. a
I know
question.
why, but what are we gonna do about it?
That's a conversation to have with
Yeah.
Chief Lutz when he presents his budget.
So no
Now,
one else has that problem, then I'm the only one that has
No,
to
I
have a
think
session with them?
Oh,
No, I
no.
know, I did know what the
We've been
issue
saying this
Yeah.
for
years.
years. I mean, I think, I'll tell you the truth, I think the town ought to seriously consider some sort of, not a financial audit, but a program audit of that overtime account. I often think that that overtime account is managed to maximize overtime and not to minimize it.
It's not gonna go away.
And if we were to have a program audit, I mean, that's up to the Board of Selectmen, it's just a suggestion. I would hope that it would be a program audit by a company that is not formed and run by ex-firefighters, who in my experience only go to the fire union and say, what do you want? And then write it in a report.
I mean, Chief Lutz provided numbers to us, I think it was last summer. They were fully staffed for a very short period. And the overtime, they had an itemized overtime list and it had dropped exponentially. And then as soon as people went down, the number went up, but it was down less than like 5%. But
But to that point, I think you can assume that will always be the case. Like, there will always be people getting injured, there'll always be turnover. Unless we staff more, and then we don't have the overtime, so, but then that is another, I don't know if that's a long-term solution to this problem.
Yeah.
Well, I will
It-
say this, and you can ask Mary, Mary's been on the board a long time. Every time we have increased the staff with the argument that overtime would go down, guess what happened?
No, that's not my,
Overtime went up.
yeah, right, like, I don't know the solution to the problem. I'm just saying, like, so that, what I just entertained, according to Mike, doesn't work.
I agree, we're
So
just gonna be
I don't
trying
know
to
if
do that.
there's like, I don't know. I mean, we need to certainly reduce turnover and that's
And
probably
in
started.
that same vein,
So-
I'm actually inclined to take the fire inspector position up. It's in there, it's in our budget for this year for $70,000. He's asking to increase it. I'm inclined to actually just take out that position fully for next year. Because so I would either keep it at 70 and ask that it be posted, first of all, as like an external job and see if they can get somebody at that rate. And then we can have a discussion about it. I don't like the idea of increasing that salary to make somebody in that department move into the job and now you're down in the person.
Yeah.
And if I just think if staffing is an issue, I don't want to take away from what we already have. So that's my feeling
Yeah.
on that.
So you're basically you're perpetuating the problem.
Yes.
So,
And
and to just what Michael said, I mean, historically, that has been the issue. We felt that every time we got it fully staffed, that the overtime would drop. But it doesn't ever get to that point because over the years, it's never been fully staffed. I mean, I think consistently, Michael,
Yeah,
that it's, and I honestly, I think if we're down 5 people and the chief has said he gets everybody trained and then 2 people are leaving because they're going back to possibly where they're from. It's a problem that I don't know how you solve it, but we certainly have to come to some, because you can't have this, coming in and out, and it's not helpful for the town. And I think it just makes it more difficult to eventually get paramedics here,
Yeah.
because you got to somehow stabilize it.
Yeah.
I think you have to stabilize the department before you can even go to the next phase.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's it's still not, doesn't solve the problem, but it is a statewide issue. Last year, I was on a MMA subcommittee that was looking at this issue because statewide, they're having it in the police and fire service, they're having it all over. We We have a lot of local candidates in the police that seem to stay. We're not getting local candidates in the fire side for the EMS side. So that seems to be, as the board members indicated, that when people come from far away, there are so many openings around the state that they do move back to where they're originally where their support base is at the, later on in their career. But it is, again, it's not an answer, but there's been workshops and committees statewide trying to address this to get more people into the field.
And another thing that's happening is you get so much construction going on now in town, which requires fire inspectors. And we get caught in the middle, send a guy across the street. This is just this didn't happen, but it happens. The guy goes across the street, they push the button, the alarm in the apartment doesn't work. And you've got a guy there an hour, 2 hours going there. It should not be the town's problem when you're doing that. It should be done by a professional building inspector or a fire inspector. Doesn't have to be a fireman. He has to be a fire inspector. And once you get into that routine, you're talking maybe another $100 a day for that person. And you've got 100 units coming over here. So that's $100,000 worth, easily. It's not functioning the way it should be doing there. You've got a guy on Church Street, on the corner of Church and Main, who drives to Auburn every day in the Auburn fire truck. And things like that shouldn't be that problem.
I'm basically in agreement with the chair. I mean, I think the finance committee has to discuss, that inspector position, but basically, I believe the discussion should be around, shouldn't we fund it at all? And certainly not funding it at, what was it?
100.
Almost,
$1 million.
Well, I think he said 125. We talked about 100.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we've exhausted the search
Let me ask
for
you
that.
this.
I think I guess I thought it was more wide. I've seen other fire inspectors be advertised more widely. I didn't realize it was just within.
Yeah.
I thought it was to the public, so.
I
that was
think it
my
could
mistake, I
be.
guess.
Why couldn't it be advertised to the public?
Yeah, it could.
No, I think I thought when we said, let's find someone, I guess that was my assumption, so I guess I shouldn't assume that it was publicly advertised.
See, I thought, my assumption was that this was going to be an internal upgrade to someone.
Well, this year I
was
think he was
within the
advocating.
department.
Yeah, this year I think he was advocating for that, but I think last year it was open. But again, maybe I'm misreading.
Well, I'm not saying there's not a need for it. We just gotta solve the issue. That's all, somewhere along the way.
I think the only challenge with the permitting, and I understand, I understand the hesitancy on the 125 piece of it. I think that the number of times he continues to come in here to convey that there's locations that are outdated on their inspections. I just think that puts the community at a severe risk. So I personally would be opposed to removing it altogether, but I wouldn't be opposed to level funding it at 70. And then I thought we were supposed to get some information on, can that position be a non-union position? Or does it have to go through the union? If it's non-union, then like you mentioned, can it be posted externally? If it's a union position, then that's a whole other challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've asked for a list of where's a backlog of all the buildings that need to be done. And I'm not saying that I don't believe feedback on how people's day-to-day job is going and what they're doing. But I think it would be when we're working on a budget, it's helpful to have data around how far behind are we? How much time are firefighters spending doing this work? Can it not be in the union? If you were to advertise this externally, is 70K fair? Things like that.
Well, I know historically, the captains and what have you, they would help with the inspections. So it has always been internal,
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
they've never gone outside. But I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it. I think you should look
right.
all avenues to see which is the best fit.
Yeah.
Well, particularly when you're talking about a new position,
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
you know?
Can I ask a question about SEMA? Does the Board of Selectmen like oversee SEMA at all in any capacity?
Police department and the fire, police
Like-
chief and the fire chief oversee that now. They took the responsibility.
Okay. So the ask is for a 10K stipend for somebody for those two departments to run SEMA. So that's like a new thing that they're
Yeah, I think that's from the,
Overseeing it.
the fire department chief. I mean,
Yeah.
I think when both of the heads of the departments were here,
Mhm.
that Chief Coyne acknowledged that the fire chief is doing most of it.
yeah. Okay.
So I think it would be on that end of it from the fire.
Yeah.
But again, you know, you'd have to get more specifics as to,
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Now you brought that up.
I used to talk about this as a selectman. Is that department necessary at all?
oh, yes. I mean,
SEMA?
Yeah, SEMA. Oh, yeah.
But I think.
Well, you know, when
But-
there's emergencies.
If there was a disaster, I mean, I would think the two chiefs would be in charge.
I
Why
mean,
do we have to have an entire
even
department?
if you have you have a water main break and it's coming into your, like down on Main Street when that
Right, yeah.
hydrant was going over.
Yes, yes.
I mean, essentially that's SEMA coming down there with all the pumps and assisting. So I think it's more so than like MEMA or FEMA on a larger scale, but I think if any residents have issues, they'll head right down there to help.
I mean,
Do other,
my wondering always was, why couldn't those pumps just be at the fire department and the fire department with, or DPW? Why we need a department that has this decrepit building that should have been, the town should have got rid of 20 years ago, except Brownie got up at town meeting and said, oh, we're gonna do fundraising and Nipro's gonna give us millions of dollars to fix it. Then, of course, the building continued to fall down. So town meeting, anyway. It's one of my pet peeves,
yeah,
but
to your point,
I have
like,
to
do
leave
other towns have
By one.
SEMA-like organizations? Like, is that
or is
commonplace?
this just
Like
something left
Lancaster,
over from World
Berlin,
War II?
Bolton?
I think most departments do, or emergency management. They've changed them to, emergency management, and most towns do have emergency management. A lot of times, which Clinton has done as well, is those roles have moved to fire and police, and some have public health as well.
We talked about the building being in terrible shape. What's wrong with them moving to the old fire station? And that's sitting there. I don't think anything's being done with that. This place is falling down. Something's got to be done with that old fire station. Now, I know when we say we were going to go with the ALF, Advanced Life System, that probably people will be staying in there instead. But right now, we have a building that's not falling down. We have another building that's getting older year by year. Is it possible to do something with fixing that up and have them move down there and not worry about uptaking that other building? Or is that out of discussion?
Well,
Well,
it's
I-
mostly just storage of equipment, right?
Right. Well, I know that, I mean, like,
Huh?
there have been studies done on the cost of restoring that building, and it's millions. So, I mean, if you're
Fire
talking,
station, the old fire
the old
station.
fire station. So if you're talking about just storing equipment
Right.
there,
There's no personnel, there's no,
mm,
it's just storing
Just a big
equipment.
garage.
What
Maybe
improvement would have to
something-
be done to the old fire department to put some equipment in there? I mean,
You gotta stabilize a lot of the brickwork and things like
Um,
that.
so- Anything else on, I want to talk about administrative assistant positions too, but anything else on fire budget? Any feedback?
I mean, I have mixed feelings about it, but I mean, if it is a lot of work for somebody to go down and tend to that building, I suppose some sort of stipend wouldn't be out of the question.
When the chief was here, he mentioned like he did some research on other towns and stipends, so I'm gonna ask him for that as a follow-up, because I thought it wasn't in his budget, and what they provide, so I'll ask him for that.
I think the challenge with both chiefs doing it is we already know that they're spread very thin. So, you know, if you had a stipend position where it was someone who was not the chief that was designated, then
Who would decide, like, who's designated?
Be the Board of Selectmen.
And to your point earlier, like I mean, it would be helpful to know like how many times are they called to in an emergency? How many times are they called to? How often are they needed? Like I guess I don't have a great grasp on
Yeah.
it, and I know a lot of the volunteers, so I'm sure they're not like noting it, but like even if it's just a super rough estimate of emergencies they've been called to assist with, I think that is helpful.
It's hard to just throw like $10,000 stipend with like.
If you don't know
I
how
just
much
don't
that's,
know.
I mean,
Yeah.
how often are you gonna be
Yeah,
Yeah.
performing whatever you're gonna be performing?
yeah.
So,
And it feels like some of that stuff is like maintenance, like we're saying, like the maintenance of the
Yeah, I
building
know,
is
that's
the
what it sounded
biggest,
like was like the
time.
biggest time suck.
Yeah, versus,
work.
yeah, so.
I don't know how much of it is maintenance on the building versus
Or-
like right now was getting all the machines
stuff, yeah.
maintained.
Yeah.
So once they switched everything over to ethanol-free fuel, then that was a huge piece of the equation. But it's the, you know, it's the ongoing maintenance. So then when they,
But does the
Equal.
state of the building impact the maintenance? Like if the building's freezing and has no heat, like does that impact? I don't know enough about ethanol gas, but.
well, I know years ago, maybe Michael, you remember that when we asked them if they wanted to set up their radios and everything down in the basement, that we had adequate space for them, but they weren't amenable to that. They didn't at the time accept the offer after that.
No,
Remember what?
it was a private club that the town was financing. I mean, that's basically what it was.
I
A
mean,
private radio club that the town was financing.
But I mean, remember, I do recall when we had the warrant article to take the building down
Yeah,
because of the shape of the building and, you know, the condition of the building was, you know, there's no water, there's no heat, there's not a window in the place, it's all boarded up. Obviously, I mean, everyone's acknowledged that the building is in horrible condition.
I mean, you know, to the point on the old fire station where it wouldn't be open to the public, maybe the cost of bringing it up to whatever necessities would be necessary for them to work out of there, it would be worth looking into. And
Can't
Something
be
has to
worse
be
than the
done.
building they've got.
Every year, if you let it sit there.
Yeah.
Oh,
get-
definitely, Paul,
kind of
definitely. The longer it stays vacant.
Okay. So the DPW wanted to add an administrative assistant because they're essentially losing 17 and a half hours for admin going full-time to facilities. DPW has a current admin that's full-time and he's asking to add another. And then the other admin asked, I missed the Parks and Rec budget, but I believe she was asking for an admin too, right?
Yeah.
So I won't start with my opinion this time, but any feedback on either
yeah,
of
there
those
was
positions?
human resources.
Right,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I wanna talk about his ads too. He wants, maybe, there was two options, like, essentially, he wants either one or two more full-time people in his department.
We just can't keep adding right now, I don't think. I just don't think everybody says, okay, everybody's doing it, so let's do it.
Yeah.
Gonna start getting into tight times, I feel. You know, with things coming down the road next year and the year after, they're gonna be very costly.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to add too. I would ask the DPW superintendent to see how it could go with one admin. I'm sure the facilities admin can still help in some capacity and then give feedback. So maybe he can even check in with your board and let you know if there is too much going on that we can reassess it next year, I think.
Yeah, it'd be good to know too, like if the reason for the admin is, I think the funny thing was like, fielding phone calls?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of questions are being called in about that we could address with like updating our website, communications? Like, how do we kind of let, I don't know exactly. I mean, obviously, if someone doesn't get their trash picked up, they're gonna call, but like, is there a pattern of information that's coming in that we could try to think about? Or say like, we've got 10 people calling every week about X, like, how do we fix that?
Oh, just looking at different municipalities, their websites, you know, there's something called 311.
Yeah.
And I would be curious, you know, to your point, how much could we divert from there where if your trash isn't picked up, can it just be sent in a message where then it automatically goes right to the DPW foreman, where it just bypasses the phone call in? Now, you're probably not going to eliminate all of it, but if you could cut that, you know,
Yeah.
and it's only 25% that are still
Yeah.
coming in or calling.
Would that be something that the DPW like superintendent could look into and ask maybe his current admin to help look into it?
Yeah, because I think most of the websites, we run the same platform. So I don't know if it's just an add-on module that they could use.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, the 311 is like kind of like everything. Like, there's a traffic light out. It's just like
Yeah.
people reporting in on issues. There's a pothole here. There's
Mm.
a traffic light out. There's railroad tracks. Everything.
And then what about the Parks and Rec position? Like, what was I missed that.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the before and after school program that was formerly handled by the school
Yeah.
is now being absorbed by the Parks and Rec department. She said that it'll be different, but like ostensibly it's the same, so they're gonna have like probably an increase in parents. They're gonna have a daily program, I guess, now.
Yeah.
Where before it's a little bit more. I think the admin positions they've asked for have been seasonal in the past,
Yes.
right? Where it's just been like a few months,
Mhm.
where now they have a little bit more, I don't want to speak for her, but that's the gist I got, where they're absorbing this before and after school program. So they're anticipating that you got parents involved looking for children, that if they're unavailable, this person would be more or less managing the intake of information there.
I definitely think there should be consideration on funding, at least, funding one position in human
Right.
resources. As far as the generalist goes, where, I think since this department was created however many years ago, I mean, that's always been a huge hurdle. And, I understand, looking at other departments that have current admin or have several employees, to me, I don't think it has to be a one size fits all where you're either adding or we're not. The department needs it, and it's important for the town's operation of that department basically be sustainable. And at this point, it seems like every 10 years there's turnover there.
That was one thing that I was kind of thinking of in that budget presentation is just, I wouldn't want there to be more turnover in that department because of the amount of work, I guess, if the school is not going to handle their own HR stuff, that is a lot more coming that way. So that is my only thought about adding somebody. But I agree, like maybe adding one and seeing how it goes.
Yeah.
At like a lower position. I think he probably has to go to the personnel board, right? On like what exactly his positions are that he's asking for.
I feel
Well,
like he may
just
have
in-
already just
just in
maybe pointed
terms
that
of
out to them
discussion.
before, but you're right.
I think I was on the board when we first discussed having a human resources professional. And now, looking at, you know, the highest request there was $283,000. And they're talking about before the individual departments handled this. I wonder if we aren't better off going, I'm not in favor of adding another position to that department. I mean, I wonder if we're not better off going back to let the departments handle their own personnel and save ourselves $250,000. I mean,
So if you were on the board when you decided to have the position,
Yeah.
what was the rationale for having
well, we
it?
thought it would be better coordination and would take some of the burden off the treasurer on the health insurance stuff and things like that. I don't think that we anticipated, or I didn't anticipate that we were going to be getting requests for 283. I mean, really and truly, I mean, maybe I'm just too old and time has passed me by. But it seems like if someone comes into the town hall and passes gas, they should be paid $100,000.
It's the market.
Yeah.
It's the market.
It's ridiculous. So some of these, I thought that request was ridiculous, and I'm not, I mean, you know, we'll deliberate separately and I might be convinced. But as of now, I'm not voting for those two positions.
For the two within HR,
In HR,
you wouldn't either position, or would you be in favor of one, like a generalist?
and at this point in time, I'm not in favor of any positions in that department.
Okay.
I mean, you may recall the request for the $14,000 for the job search. I said, you know, we hire a human services professional for $100,000. And then they want $14,000 to do a job. I think we'd be better off without a human services professional, a human resources professional, and pay the $14,000 on the consultant things every now and then. But I mean, I could be convinced differently, I guess. So I'm not absolutely opposed to that one generalist thing, but my inclination, if I were to vote today, would be not to vote for it.
I would strongly suggest having him come and explain some of the things that either have not occurred in the past 8 months prior to and what he's up against, because I think that might sway your opinion on whether to eliminate the position.
I thought.
And I
it
do
was
think that
perfect.
I do think that a lot of towns are moving towards like centralizing that because state laws change, federal laws change. I mean, I think we've said over again, like some of the stuff is not in compliance. I think he is working closely with the treasurer collector. So I would just say before you make that decision, if you're looking for more information about why we should have human resources and maybe support it more, then have him in and have him go through
You know,
what we're dealing with.
and I think, you know, to the point on having department heads do it, well, ultimately somebody is going to still be responsible for disseminating that information, which probably is going to fall on the town administrator's shoulders. So if it's not that work doesn't go away, and I know that some of the feedback we've received is the inconsistencies amongst departments when it comes to the policies. And I think even looking at the payroll aspect of it, where, you know, we cannot ensure that under the current system that all records are accurate. So there's a monetary cost that goes along with that. So you know, in terms of dealing with the day-to-day operation, yeah, I mean, if it's not going to be them, it's going to be somebody. And I don't think that any one of these department heads have any background in human resources. But I mean, you know, to your point, I understand, but
I mean, I'll tell you the truth. I mean, I'll say again, I'm ready to be convinced, but I thought that, speaking with 36 years, 40 some years experience in government service, I thought that budget presentation was a perfect example of empire building.
Was he hired as a manager?
Suddenly, we need 3 people to do the job. 3. And
We may
really,
have
We
always
may have
needed.
always needed it, yeah.
Was he hired as a manager or a director? Is there no problem?
Manager, but I would argue he's probably doing
Excuse me?
manager, but he'd argue he's probably doing.
So is that, by going to our director, he gets a higher pay? Is that what, goes on or no?
I think typically directors have people underneath them or.
So that wouldn't necessarily mean that it has anything to do with the pay. Just
I
has to
mean,
do
it
with
would
his
be, I
title.
mean, one of the things that he's trying to do is untangle a lot of personnel related issues that have been over the years, like making sure the jobs are level with each other. If you're a director, then this is what that entails across the departments versus, the inconsistency in job titles leads to confusion on the pay scale. So that is partly, what he's identified as issues. So again, when you decentralize it, you do lead to, hey, this department is different from this department across different, and then, there's inconsistencies there across employee basis. So you could be a deputy in one department and you could be a director in one. Do they mean the same thing? What if, it's kind of across the board.
So you're saying the title, that manager or director doesn't make any difference, or it does make a difference?
I think it should make a difference. Here, it's a little unclear.
So what was he hired as?
He's a human resources manager.
A manager?
But managers sometimes don't have people reporting to them. So if we add another position, this is kind of like typical where I work. Like if you then have people directly reporting to you, most of them would be directors. But I don't think that's unclear here because we have
So when he
some
was hired,
homegrown system here.
when he was hired,
Manager.
a manager, but if he had any thoughts of bringing someone else on board, he's already knowing who's going to get a raise? I'm
Well,
not,
I
I'm not
think
saying,
I
I think the
contrived.
personnel board would have to
Yeah.
probably assess the position. If, I don't know. I don't know that it automatically comes with a raise.
Just the opposite.
and again, I'm just concerned about everybody adding on, and it's money that's coming out of our kitty that we have, and,
Right.
And I think that's kind of the mindset of like, just because one department is going to be funded differently than the others, I don't think that brings validity to everybody's request for an admin. I mean, when you have a department that is losing 17 and a half hours and wants to replace it with 35 hours, that's, to me, in my opinion, that's apples and oranges. And when we look at what we fund for the abatements for the seniors and the veterans, that hasn't broke $20,000 ever. So, we're always left with a surplus of 30,000. So could we utilize any of their services to try to, if it's just warrant articles, if that's not warrant articles, but the warrant, can we get creative? Instead of having to add another full-time body. But I think if human resources, based on the presentation, they have a need. And I think if we fulfill that need, then I don't think everybody needs to receive equity in that situation as far as that. Not that I'm proponent.
and I don't think it's my position to ask this, but do we think in 6 months we get some kind of report to see how he's doing now and things seems are going better? Because he seemed very,
Seemed overwhelmed.
Yeah.
overwhelmed. Thank you. That's exactly what it is. It seems like he's overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And I just feel that after 6 months, I'm not going to have the same, I'll have a better feeling. But again, it's not my position necessarily to say that, but dollars and cents do run along with this.
So you think he hasn't been there long enough to judge what the
I hope
workload
that's
is?
what the situation is, yes. I'm hoping that's what
Yeah.
it is. I'm hoping.
It's tough because I don't know, perhaps this is a discussion that he has had with Michael before, but a lot of times, sometimes the first time we're hearing it is like attached to a number versus like, this is what I'm seeing in my department. This is where in the future it might, because, we have 8 months of, maybe not consistency there. This is the third person in this position. Maybe that is the discussion that we have to have as opposed to, where the needs are in the department before attaching budget consideration to it. So maybe that's on us.
Christine
it's-
Purple had said the same thing.
Yeah, she did the same thing.
Previous person said,
Yeah.
you need another person. That person came from Marlboro in municipality. And this person is saying the same exact thing right out of the gate. So I don't think it's because the person,
The
Is
specific person, if you
overwhelmed, yeah.
judge them to be overwhelmed, yeah.
See, just, my opinion is that if you apply for a position, you know what the job requirement is up at that position. I agree with you, Paul. I mean, it would seem to me that if he's had a position of this nature previously, that they should be able to handle the position. If it's something beyond what they anticipated, then maybe there is a 6-month period that you go back and you say, well, look at, what about this job? What is there about this job that you didn't anticipate that
Yeah.
was in a previous job that you were in? I mean, I think that's a reasonable question.
I mean, the challenge is that this third person is still creating a department. I mean, it's not as if the department is up and running and now we have someone new coming in. This person is still trying to establish a department that was created 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, the first person on the job didn't even stay that long. I think
But
I met her
there's-
twice, and I know I asked her 2 questions if she would look things up for me. I never even got an answer, and she said, well, I can't do that. And Christine was here for what, all of a year and a half, and went back to her old job. So, I mean, I don't know why she left Clinton to go back to her other job, but, you know, I mean, I don't think there's a tremendously long history in this position.
So do you think we have a
Yeah.
retention issue? Like, is there something about the position?
I don't
or the
know.
Job
I
responsibilities?
just don't think that there's like longevity in that position. It was created and there's been, the first one wasn't even, well, how long was she on the job for? 6, 8 months, maybe? And
During the
Christine was,
pandemic.
I'm sorry.
During the pandemic, right?
Well, and then Christine, who was here for, I don't think, a year and a half, maybe. And grant you, it was open for what, 7 or 8 months, but I just don't know how you can target. I mean, I guess I'm agreeing with you, Paul. I think.
Are
Can't,
there any other like budget conversations that anyone wants to, I just have to leave in like 5 minutes, but is there any other budget conversations that anyone wants to have while we're all together?
Well, maybe it's the last personnel issue.
Hmm.
I'm generally in favor of the parking enforcement person down.
Oh, that's another one that was an ad, yeah.
They can earn.
Everything we've tried over 20 years has not worked. And merchants tell us there continues to be a parking problem down there. So it might be worth trying a part-time position for a year or two.
What do you all think about that?
I would go year to year on it, yeah. I would agree.
I'm not sure. Obviously, I think enforcement does curb behavior, but I also wonder too, like, are there other things we can do in terms of like education, given some of the feedback that we've gotten from that? But it does seem to be working in Hudson. So,
Oh,
I mean, I guess I'm not of we don't have enough parking. I think
Yeah.
we have parking. I think people don't want to walk. I think we have a behavior issue.
Yeah.
I don't think
that's-
so.
It's funny, I have always said, it's amazing to me that people in Clinton will drive down High Street wanting to go to Aubuchon's, and if they can't park right in front of Aubuchon's, will drive to the mall and walk 100 yards into the mall. And that seems logical to them.
I mean,
Uh,
when you look down on Water Street in front of Prescott Mills, now there's people parking down towards where Brennan's used to be. There's a municipal lot, not even 50 feet, that they could be parking on, but they line up all along that street.
Yeah.
And,
But the argument was made to me and so I repeat it to you, that the problem isn't the parking for Clinton residents, it's for people who are from outside of Clinton that want to come and are not familiar with some of the spots. So, I mean, I would be inclined to fund it for a year or two to see how it works out. But I don't have any great commitment to it. And again, I could be convinced otherwise, and as we talk at the finance committee.
so something I'd just like to bring up before you have to leave. So just looking at the budget dating back to FY18 through FY24, on average, we're looking at a 4% increase every year, right? It's gone up almost 24% during that time. And I think one of the challenges I see, when we look at the school department's request, the town has funded the school department levelly throughout however long, the last 7, 8, 9 years. And when we look at the department asks, they continue to increase. And my feeling is this is hindsight, but departments I think need to be, everybody needs to feel that crunch a little bit. And I think in an ideal scenario, when budget requests went out, if we had asked for like an ABCD where A is your ideal, B is level funded, and C is at a 2% decrease, that information would be helpful, because it's not sustainable for the taxpayers to continue funding 4% increases annually. And when we look at the funding that some of our departments are receiving that are basically being saved, for example, with the library saving for furniture on a library that may or may not be built, right now I think we need to be looking at decreasing any increases, because we know that the payment for the school is coming due, and that's going to be a huge number in itself.
That was just what I was gonna say.
So I think when we look at what has been requested, and I don't know if the timeline is going to allow for this, but I really think that to go back to the departments and ask, can you trim 2% off of what your asks are, or whatever the case may be, because again, one department is cutting, other departments are not. And I think at some point we really should look at getting to a point of being close to level funded. And then when we have these budget discussions, if we're adding positions or whatever the case may be, then that's something that these department heads need to factor into their decision making, versus it seems like every year it's like, this is our ideal budget. And then we kind of chip away at a couple things and then we move on. And, here we are 4% later at the fall. But I would like to see some work with department heads on trying to shrink that number, that $1 million. I know some of it is going to be pertaining to the health insurance costs. So we all should be able to chip in and kind of bring that number down versus having to rely on raising everybody's taxes again.
Well, that's the reality of it. Everyone's taxes in this town are going to increase substantially at the beginning of next year. And, the reality is there are a lot of seniors in this town that are trying to stay in their homes, that don't have pensions, that are living under Social Security. And that blanket isn't getting bigger and higher and more lucrative for them every year. And money, what we're paying in the grocery stores and electrical bills and everything else that people pay. And to me, it's a wish list of, positions that people want, really is what increases the percentage of their budget. And I mean, to me, it's just, as hard as these decisions become, sometimes you have to make them, because you have to look down the road that what effect is it going to have on the people that live in this town.
Is there time for, if the finance committee was to kind of go back to the department heads and just say, can you send us, your, you know, your budget plus 1%, you know?
Mm.
And to kind of put that on them to kind of do the work on that part of it versus.
Kind of a tight, that's a really
mean,
tight. I think
Yes, it also-
next year that
Yeah.
would be ideal,
Yes.
but I mean,
If we
to start
start
it
this
right now and try
early.
to start it over again, I don't know.
And that, so then that brings up a
I
question.
don't know if there's time on that, but I think that there's still time for us to look at things where I think people increase $5,000 here, 2,500 there, and cut all of that out as part of our process.
Which,
And
I
then
will
that kind of essentially just makes them do that work with their budget for next year.
yeah.
See, like, and not to cut you off, so I think, so based on the alternatives of, hey, we need you, we need you to get this number down to this versus the finance committee eliminating, like, what can you, like, you're giving them the opportunity, what can you do without versus, hey, we're gonna cut this, this and this. And then if they're like, well, we need that, I could have got, that's all. I think one gives them a little opportunity,
Yeah.
but if
I
it's
mean,
within-
ultimately though, they can move, yeah, I know the way we budget is line by line, but if we just give them less than they're asking for, and not saying like we're gonna do this across the board, but if we give them less than what they're asking for, bottom line, they can move money around how they see fit to make things work. But
Yeah, I mean, I think that with the library, I mean, I know the last numbers we had, they were supposed to get about 47,000 was on the cherry sheet for the upcoming year.
Mm.
Whatever they can do to kind of help offset. I know there's still technology in there, which I'm not sure what that means. That was $8,000, but
Should be
I digress.
reduced. Yeah.
so, well, do we have to like vote on like subcommittee and make it like an official thing? Or if we just decide like our board and their board separately, like who's on subcommittee, then we
Yeah, I
just
think
get
each
together?
board Picks their.
Okay.
members.
Okay. Alright. I have to run, sorry, because I have a meeting, but I think that's next step, determining subcommittees and getting together.
Are you gonna sit with your board and come to a conclusion? Work on yours?
I don't know.
We're gonna work on our budgets that are under our jurisdiction?
Yeah, I mean, I think the next step is for the finance committee to consider the budget as a finance committee.
I'm sorry, are you saying?
I can do that, I just thought that that's what today was for,
Yeah,
but I don't know, but I mean, if we want to spend more time
Well,
going through it, we can.
Yeah, but as a board, we haven't discussed any.
a lot of these things don't have to be done.
I guess it's just, what have we always, you used to sit.
Motion, a bunch of people. I mean,
What thing?
I don't think we've decided that really is.
no, I don't think I should do it. Sure.
Okay, I'll grab time for
Yeah,
another
I
meeting.
don't know.
I have to run.
Yeah, what the other
So you-
two.
Thank you.
I don't know about the board in general is gonna put it on their agenda. I don't think they can.
Yeah, and that's where the select board had one budget, finance
Yeah.
committee had one budget. And then if there was any difference, and that's where
So they worked it out.
yeah.
But the feedback that when I got from the department heads was like, they would prefer to be in the loop if they're getting cut so that they can make those determinations, like Matt, the example you just gave. Like versus someone just, but then Aaron said, oh, they just move it. But it is kind of like
Are we adjourning?
Yeah.
So if you wanna
Motion to.
motion to adjourn,
Just one thing, I follow along what you're saying. I think at the beginning, it was forms sent out, we wanted everybody to put on and turn your forms in. And one of it, I think we had to, next 5 years, what you needed for expenses. I think that's very important for us to try to stay on top of that and find out.
Well, you have a capital plan. That's what every town should do. You plan out 5 years. Clinton's never done that.
No, I'm
It makes it
suggesting
so much
maybe-
easier that makes more sense, Paul. So you kind of know what's coming down the road.
and even with the software, the budgeting software, I think the paper side of this, I printed, originally, my intention was to try to go through and look at increases along the way and compare departments. Cause then at least you could see could there be a target of a 1% increase or a 2% increase, but everything has to be done by hand, you know? So I don't know when that software is supposed to come into play, but, you know, everything's PDF.
Just something to think about. They might, there was a form that you made, 3 or 4, 5 pages you made of the budget right now that had, possibly get one, doesn't have to be right now, but can we look forward to getting one of those shortly?
Yep, we'll send
Please.
it out to everyone. I didn't, again, didn't know what was being discussed today, so certainly I'll get that out to everyone so they can see the
Thank you.
compilation of everything.
All right, is it, do we have
Okay,
anything
we'll
else?
make a motion to adjourn.
Motion made second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I guess